Hi everyone, it's Laura here for CC Designs, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to create a cute Valentine's Day card with the Valentine Animals stamp set and the Hearths and Arrows background stamp. As a first step, I started working on my background, and I have here on my glass mat some watercolor cardstock by Ranger and Distress Oxides in Festive Berries, Worn Lipstick and Spun Sugar. And I'm going to show you a very quick way to obtain a watercolor-like background with your Distress Oxides. So what you want to do is you want to swipe them across your glass mat or a sleek surface. You want to then spritz the area with water and bring your paper face down onto the inks. If you want to add more color, you're going to spritz the inks again so that they can move a little bit more easily and bring your paper to the inks once more. And that's it. Basically your background is ready, and because we used 3 different colors, we have some sort of an ombre effect on the background. And now I'm using my heat gun to speed up the heating process, but if you prefer you can leave it to air dry. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some tone-on-tone stamping using the same Distress Oxides and a background stamp from the new CC Designs release. The stamp is called Hearths and Arrows, and I'm inking it with Festive Berries, Worn Lipstick and Spun Sugar, so in the same order as I have swiped the inks across my glass mat. And then I can bring the paper to the rubber stamp, and I'm going to sort of swipe my hands across the paper so that I can transfer the ink to the paper. But I'm not too concerned about getting a perfect impression, because I think that a little bit of texture in the stamping adds interest to the background. And here it is, a super quick watercolor-like background with tone-on-tone stamping. As a second background element, I die cut some white cardstock using the Quad Collage die, also by CC Designs, and then I moved on to my images. The stamp set I am going to use today is the Valentine Animals stamp set, also part of the January release, and I'm going to stamp the giraffe, the sheep and all the smaller additional images. And I'm going to stamp multiple of these smaller images because I want to use them to decorate my card. And in general, I prefer to stamp more images and have leftovers that I can use for future projects, rather than having to go back at the end of the project because I'm missing something. I'm stamping with Memento Tuxedo Black ink on Nina Solar White 110 pounds cardstock, and I'm going to do some coloring with my Spectrum Noir markers. I'm not showing the stamping of all the images, but you will see them later on. And now it's time to move on to the coloring. The first part of the coloring process did not get recorded, but I am showing you with my second layer exactly what I did when I put down the first layer of color. I am using 3 shades per color, and I am adding shadows as if the light is coming from the top right of the screen, so that the darker areas are the ones on the bottom and on the left part of the images. I will also have some cast shadows under the skirt and around the muzzle of the giraffe because that's protruding. But I'm doing some simple shading for today's project because I have so many images to color. For the head and body of the giraffe, I used GB6, GB3 and GB2, and for the spots I am using GB10 and GB11. And I will have a color chart for you on the blog post that you will find linked in the description box down below, so that you can use that as a reference. For the ears and for the muzzle, I used FS9, FS4 and FS2. And then I decided to color the dress pink. Because pinks can be sometimes a little bit hard to blend with each other, I started by wetting the paper with my light color, which is the PP2 marker. And then I started adding my shading, adding first the mid-tone color, which is MG2, and then my shadows, first with MG3, but then I figured out it wasn't going to be dark enough, so I added a bit of MG4 to the mix. And again, the shadows are placed as if the light was coming from the top right of the screen, so that my shadows are mostly focused on the left and bottom portion of the images, and also around the areas where the arms meet the body. For the heart-shaped balloon, I used the same MG color family, but I went a tone darker. So for the shadows, I used MG5. I blended that out towards the highlight with MG4 and MG3, and finally, as a highlight color, I used MG2. And as you can see, I always go in with a second layer of color so that I increase the contrast and I get a nicer blend. I also took the opportunity to blend out the pink dress a little bit more with my PP2 marker, and then I moved on and started coloring the sheep. I used the same FS9, FS4 and FS2 combination for the skin of the sheep as I had used for the muzzle and the ears of the giraffe. And then for the t-shirt and the socks, I went for a teal combination. So I used BT8, BT6 and BT4. And the color palette for this card is inspired to the Doodlebug Cream and Sugar paper pad, so it will be pinks, teals and browns. And the way I'm introducing brown into the card is by coloring the trousers of the little sheep with EB8, TN8 and TN6, and I will use the same color combination to color the cupcakes so that they are chocolate cupcakes. For the wool, I used BG4, BG2 and BG3, and these are warm grays, and I'm doing some very simple shading, basically tracing the contour of the wool, and I'm just tracing the areas on the left and the bottom so that I am consistent with the rest of the shading. And in order to add some texture to the central part of its head, I drew 3 C-shaped lines and I shaded them with BG4 and blended that out with BG2. I then moved on and colored the rest of the images, but I'm going to skip this part, otherwise this video will be very long. The color schemes I used are the same that I've shown so far, and the coloring is still pretty simple, again with the darkest areas on the bottom and left portion of the images and the highlights on the opposite sides. The only new color combination I introduced was BT4 and BT2 that I used to shade this love letter, and then I went ahead and finished up the coloring off camera. And here you can see all the images once I was done coloring. At this point, I could go ahead and use the coordinating dies to the Valentine Animals stamp set to die cut my images. I cut down my paper to a size that would fit through my Sidekick machine, and then I'm going to position the dies in place, secure them with some low-tack tape, and I can finally go ahead and die cut my images. I'm not going to show you all the die cutting because I think you don't need to see that, but basically I took my time and cut all the images, and here is the result. The only element I'm missing at this point is the sentiment, and I decided to do some heat embossing with white embossing powder over some brown cardstock. So I die cut a flag banner using one of the dies in the Quad Collage die set by CC Designs, and I'm going to stamp one of the sentiments in the Valentine Animals stamp set with Versamark ink. I'm then going to coat the stamped sentiment with white embossing powder, this one is by Wow, and I'm going to heat set the embossing powder with my heat gun. And in order to minimize warping, you want to make sure that your heat tool is nice and hot before bringing it to the paper, so I always turn it on while I'm doing my stamping. At this point, everything is ready and we can go ahead and assemble the card. I'm going to use my Nouveau Deluxe adhesive to glue down this Quad Collage die cut to my background, and I'm gluing it flat because I don't want a ton of dimension on this card, but you could also raise it on some foam tape or turn this into a shaker if you like. I'm going to glue my two little critters to the bottom left portion of the card. And because I'm using liquid glue, I have some time to move them around and position them exactly as I want. The little sheep is going to hold the heart-shaped balloon, and I glued it so that it sticks a little bit out of the edge of the card because I think this adds more interest to the project. I did the same with the sentiment banner, and finally I'm going to decorate the rest of the card with the smaller images that I have colored and die cut. And I did have some leftovers, but I can always use them in a future project. I'm finishing off the front of the card by sticking down these steel hearts, and I then mounted my card on a top folding A2 card base. And because I had these images lying on my desk, I decided to decorate the inside of the card as well. So I added one flag banner on the top right corner, and then one cupcake and one of the love letters to the opposite corner of the card. And then I finished off the inside by stamping another of the sentiments in the Valentine Animals stamp set by CC Designs. And at this point you could call your card done, but I always enjoy adding finishing touches, so I decided to add some polka dots to the dress of the giraffe, some stripes to the t-shirt of the sheep as well as to its socks, and then I used my Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen to add shimmer to the heart-shaped balloons and all the other hearts on the image. I added some shimmer to the flag banners too, and then I reproduced those polka dots and those stripe patterns there too, so that they would tie in nicely with the rest of the card, so with the clothes of the critters. And lastly, for a bit of gloss and dimension, I coated all the hearts with glossy accents, and I left everything aside to dry overnight. And here is the final result. I really love that subtle ombre tone-on-tone stamped background, and these critters are absolutely adorable. And that's it for today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I inspired you to create with the CC Designs Valentine Animals stamp set and the Hearts and Arrows background stamp. Don't forget to subscribe to the CC Designs channel for more inspiration. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.